Okay, welcome back in. I'm going to be reviewing this past weekend's divisional ups, I should say, plural, in the NFL. So we're down to the last four games of the playoffs. Well, not the last four games, technically. There's still three more games to go. But for the weekend, this is the last time that there will be four games. Next Sunday, there will obviously be two, and then two Sundays after that, we'll have the Super Bowl. So technically only three more playoff games, and then you have the Pro Bowl game in there as well. So one more month or 3 more weeks of football after this. I can't believe it's coming to an end. Okay, so the divisional matchup, we had obviously two games in the AFC, two games in the NFC. On Saturday, we had two games. The first one took place in Kansas City as the back-to-back defending Super Bowl champions took on the Houston Texans. This would be the third time that these teams have made it or played against each other in the playoffs. Kansas City won the first two games, and as you can see on the screen, they would win their third game over Houston in the postseason, 23-14. I did predict that Kansas City would win 33-17, so I was off quite a bit on that margin. The only thing I'll say about the Chiefs is, and maybe it's because I'm biased because I'm a Broncos fan, but just watching the game and watching the highlights of it, the one thing that kind of troubles me, and I'm sure a lot of people speculate this and they'll come up with whatever crazy theory that they think is likely or unlikely, but the one call that really kind of bothered me, and you could tell that the Texans players and even the coach was bothered by it after, because he said it felt like they were going up against, it was them against the world going into this game, and it really was, because they weren't just playing against the Chiefs or playing against that crowd, which can be very loud to say the least, but when certain calls aren't going your way, it definitely, I can understand why people would bring up a theory the refs get paid off or whatever it is, because there was one play in particular that Mahomes was running out of bounds and the defender just gently tapped him, like put his hands on his shoulders, and then Mahomes flopped. There's no question about it. He definitely flopped because he's slowed down enough that I've seen players get pushed out of bounds where they just like they have like a step out, like they just have an extra step, or if that makes any sense, like they're just stepping off to the side, like they're not falling down. Like I've seen players get hit a lot harder than what Mahomes did, and some of them are still standing up. So it just goes to show that he's definitely embellished quite a lot, and he probably will do it until the end of his career, because why not? He's Patrick Mahomes. So yeah, I was definitely a little put off about that, to say the least. But either way, the Chiefs are heading to the championship game for what feels like the sixth or seventh time already, because the first time they made it was in 2019. They made it 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, and 2025. Yeah, so 7 straight years that they've hosted an AFC championship game or went in to play, because last year they played away from home in the championship game against Baltimore. So for the sixth time in 7 years, they're going to be hosting the AFC championship game. And they're basically turning into the modern day New England Patriots. There's no question about it. When you have a dominant quarterback like Mahomes and then a reliable tight end, Travis Kelce, and the weapons that they have in wide receivers and with the running backs as well, they're a very dangerous team. And I wouldn't be surprised if they did three-peat the first time in the Super Bowl era that would possibly happen. And I'll call it right now. If they do win, I would not be surprised. Okay, so that takes care of that game. So far, I was 1-0 with my predictions. We'll see how I did with the rest of the games. So taking a look at just on the bottom of the screen, as you have the Detroit Lions, and they played host to the Washington Commanders. So I'm going to flip the page here. So this would be the fourth time that these two teams have met in the postseason. Washington would win the game 45-31. Therefore, they have a 4-0 playoff series lead over the Detroit Lions, and their overall record against Detroit, they are 32-16-0. So they basically have twice as many wins as they do losses. For this game, I predicted the score would be 31-20. It was a 2-score game, so I can give myself a little bit of credit on that, but I was still off when it came to the points-wise. So I'll talk briefly, first I want to talk about the Lions, and then I'll rant about that, and then I'll rave about the Commanders. So for the Lions, a lot of expectations, a lot of hype for this team heading into this season. And obviously, once they got that number one seed, it looked like they were a shoe-in to have at least host a championship game. I think a lot of people, including myself, thought Detroit would win this game, but evidently they fell short. The one thing I will give credit to Jared Goff is that at least he stepped up to the plate and admitted he could have played better. He should have done this. He should have done that. Whereas a lot of other players will finger point and say this is the reason why we lost was because of this, that, or the other reason. So I'll give Goff credit when credit is due, that he definitely, like I said, stepped up to the plate and admitted his fault. With that being said, though, I will say that Detroit, they have a promising future. Obviously, 2 straight years making the playoffs. It was such a long gap in between when they were good. I think prior to last year, the last time they made the playoffs was in the 2016-17 season. They got bounced in the first round. And then prior to that, it was like the 2013-14 season when they got bounced in the first round. So at least it's not like 5-6 years in between when postseason appearances. And I'll be the first to say this. I know I normally would say this when I make my predictions in August for football, but I would not be surprised if Detroit got back and won the NFC North again. They are a very good team, very talented team, just a little inexperienced when it comes to the postseason. I say that they made it to the championship game last year and then lost to the 49ers, but it's not like they're like the Chiefs where they make it every single year and then they can learn from their mistakes. This is definitely a learning curve for the Lions and their fans. And I got a funny feeling, like I said, that they should be just as competitive, if not better, maybe next year. Now, will they finish with the number one overall in the NFC? Maybe, maybe not, because there are a lot of good teams in that side of the conference. But yeah, I guarantee Detroit will be back in the postseason next year, unless they get injured or Jared Goff just has a terrible season next year. I definitely think the Lions should be competitive for a few years at least to come. Okay, so flipping the coin onto the Washington Commanders side, this is going to be their first NFC Championship game since 1991. So it's been 33, almost 34 years since they have been to the Final Four of the Big Dance. I'll give credit where credit is due. When I made my predictions for the Commanders, I did say that Jaden Daniels was a rookie of the year and he was a pretty darn good quarterback. I was so tempted to say he was elite. Well, now I feel pretty confident and very comfortable in admitting he is definitely an elite quarterback. Just in his rookie year, he's phenomenal. Just what he can do, getting away from pressure, and the fact that he's a mobile quarterback. So not only can he throw, but he can run as well, and which is what a lot of quarterbacks do nowadays. So I can't rave enough about him, and it sucks because like I'm a Broncos fan. I would love to have seen Bo Nix get Rookie of the Year, but after the performance that he had not only during the regular season but in the 2 playoff games against Tampa Bay and Detroit respectively, there's no question he is definitely the best uh, quarterback, at least in the rookie class from last year's draft. So I can't rave enough about the Washington Commanders. And when I did make my predictions for the wild card round, I said if there was any 5 through 7 team that could go on a run, I'm pretty sure I said Washington could be that team. And sure enough, 2 away wins, and now they're in a championship game. I don't think anyone would have expected that, but holy cow, this is one hell of a run, to say the least. Maybe it stops in the NFC Championship game. Maybe they get all the way to the Super Bowl. Who knows? I have no doubt in my mind that whenever the championship game does occur, that Washington will be very competitive with whoever they play against. Okay, so off to Sunday. We had 2 games there. The Philadelphia Eagles, the number 2 seed in the NFC, taking on the number 4 seed in the Los Angeles Rams. I predicted that Philly would win this game. The final score I said would be 24-18. The final score actually would end up being 28-22. So I didn't get the score right, but I got the spread right. So I had said that would be a 6-point differential, and sure was. This is probably the closest I got with any of the scores of all the games played. So for this particular matchup between the Rams and the Eagles, this was their 46th time meeting. And because the Eagles won, they now have an overall record between playoffs and regular season with 25 wins, 20 losses, and one tie. And when it comes to the playoffs, this was their fourth time meeting. The Rams were leading the playoff series 2-1, but because the Eagles won, they are now split at 2 games apiece. I can't rave enough about the Eagles. They are a very competitive team, and now they're off to the championship game where they will host their division rival in the Washington Commanders. That should be a hell of a matchup. It's always special when you not only have a playoff game, but when you play against your divisional foe and the Super Bowl is on the line. I got a funny feeling there's going to be a lot of hard hitting. It's going to be an intense game to say the least, and I could not be more excited about the NFC Championship game to say the least. So I'll talk first about the Rams, and then I'll go back to the Eagles. So for the Rams, obviously a very tough loss. They were hoping that they could have gotten back into the Final Four and had another shot at a Super Bowl, but unfortunately their dreams came crashing down, and now they have, I don't want to say a long off season, but I mean they're not going to have any meaningful football until September. What changes are going to occur? Will Matt Stafford come back? Will he decide to go elsewhere? Do the Rams decide to go in a different direction? They got a lot of questions moving forward, but I still think the Rams, regardless of what they do and who they have as their starting quarterback, should still be a very competitive team next year. I wouldn't be surprised if they made it in the playoffs. Now, whether or not they make it as the number one seed in that NFC West is up for grabs, as you still have the Seahawks, who are pretty competitive. They finished with the same record as LA. And then I know that the San Fran will bounce back and have a better year than they did this year, but they were just plagued with injuries. And who knows? Arizona was looking good throughout most of that season, and then they kind of fell apart at the end. So I think any of those 4 teams could win the NFC West next year. I don't think one team is really favored heavily over the other 3. So I think it's going to be competitive for the Rams to compete again next year. They did have a very good season this year, obviously, and again, whatever decisions they decide to make in the offseason will only better the team. I don't see them being this competitive and then going into like a retool or rebuild, depending on the situation of certain players on the organization. But yeah, the Rams should be very good again, like I said, next year. And I feel like I'm just saying the same thing over and over again. So I'm going to stop talking about LA for now. For Philadelphia, this is going to be their second championship game in 3 years that they will be hosting. Obviously, 2 years ago, they won against San Fran, moved on to the Super Bowl, where unfortunately they lost to KC. This is a different Eagles team than it was 2 years ago. I mean, yes, they're having a few changes, whether it's players or management or coaches, whatever it was, just from a couple of years ago. But they are definitely they're a more dangerous team, if I'm going to be completely honest with you, than they were a couple of years ago. Not saying they weren't that bad then, but I mean, Jalen Hurts is back to being 100%, playing very well. The big addition in the last year was obviously getting Saquon Barkley out of New York. So he's been a blessing in disguise for Philadelphia, if I'm going to be completely honest with you. And he's definitely changed how this team moves forward. And I got a funny feeling that if the Eagles were to go all the way to the Super Bowl, it would be because of Saquon. I mean, not trying to disrespect the wide receivers or tight ends or Jalen Hurts, but man, like what a difference Saquon's made for the Philadelphia team. And now they're in the Final Four, and they're playing a home playoff game next week. So they'll obviously have a lot of the fans, a lot of the crowd behind them to hopefully propel them back into a Super Bowl appearance. So out of the 3 games so far, I had 2 right and 1 incorrect. We'll see how I did with the last game. So that took place in Buffalo, as we had the Bills playing host to the Baltimore Ravens. This, no doubt, was the game of the week. The other ones were okay. Yes, the Eagles game was a 1-score contest, but this was the game of the week. I don't care what anybody says. I don't care what any of that stuff. But yeah, I very impressed, and I knew it was going to be an offensive explosion. The crazy thing is this is actually as close as I've gotten to with my predictions for a score-wise. I said the final score would be 27-26. and you can see on your screen the final score was 27-25. But I did pick Baltimore. I thought that, yes, Buffalo is good, and they obviously are good because they won the game and they're off to a championship. They're off to another championship appearance, or championship game appearance, I should say. But I just thought that because of the addition of Derrick Henry and because of the previous lessons learned from Baltimore in the past, that they could have overcome this and got back into the Final Four. But unfortunately, it was not meant to be. The big thing was, and I mean, everyone loves to finger point with all this other stuff, was how Baltimore got a late touchdown, but then they tried to go for two, and then Mark Andrews ended up dropping the pass in the end zone, and then that's pretty much sealed the game. They had tried an onside kick, Buffalo recovered it, and they just ran the clock out after that. So the Bills, like I said, are off to the championship game for the second time in 5 years, if I'm not mistaken, because 25, 24, 23, 22, 21. Yeah, so the first time they made it was in 2020, 21. That was basically like the COVID year of sports, at least. So I just want to take one, talk about one little thing when it comes about the Ravens, and then I'll get on to the Bills. When I talked about Jared Goff, how he stepped up to the plate with the Lions and how he admitted his wrong and how he was at fault, like I said, that was huge, and that just goes to show how great of a leader he really is, because he's taken all the blame, whether he deserved it or not. That's being selfless, and I love that about any type of leadership. It doesn't have to be about sports, about anything. If someone steps up to the plate, admits that they screwed up, whether they did or they didn't, at least they're taking the heat off of somebody else or other people. The one thing I wasn't too crazy about was in the post press conference, I should say, with the Lamar Jackson, was that he was not shy to say about how he was sick about the turnovers and sick about this and all this other stuff. So he was essentially, in my opinion at least, throwing his team under the bus. Now, he had a fumble, therefore he got hit, obviously, and then lost the ball. So and then if you have an interception, correct me if I'm wrong, but the wide receiver can't control where you throw the ball towards them. And he even overthrew his wide receiver, and then the Buffalo defender or the cornerback picked it off. So it just bothers me that he's talking about how he hates that they're like essentially almost like a one and done team when it comes to the playoffs, and they always struggled in the divisional round, and then the championship game last year they lost. And then he's talking about how he hates this. Well, then do something about it. Play smarter, play better. You're supposed to be, I mean, you're a two-time MVP in this league, and you could make an argument that he could almost be a three-time MVP, but because of how dominant Josh Allen was this year, I think that Allen will get the MVP. There's no ands, ifs, or buts about that. But you're supposed to be an elite quarterback in this league, and you're supposed to be leading by example. And if, like I said, if you're just going to be throwing shade at your teammates and how poorly they played, then how good of a leader are you, honestly? Because if you're not willing to take the blame yourself, but you're willing to blame other people, whether it's a wide receiver, running back, offensive line, whatever the case may be is, or maybe you're blaming your defense for giving up too many points. I don't know. But after I saw that, my first thought was, man, like he should have watched what Goff said the day before and taken a chapter out of that book and, humbled himself a little bit. I mean, had Lamar said, the pick was on me and I should have been a little bit more cautious about the defenders getting close and the fumble, then yes, then that would have been a better thing to say, because you know how social media is. It's like the media is all over the place. And the second you say something, it just goes viral. So it's not like it was back in the 80s, 90s, 70s, where someone said something and you have to wait to watch the news to hear what they had to say. It's because, like I said, everyone's got phones, everyone's got a camera. You click a button, you upload it, boom. And then as soon as it's uploaded, everybody can watch it. So it's not like what he's saying. It's few and far between what people can hear and what they can see. But yeah, I just thought that was kind of childish, if that makes any sense. But either way, I'm not going to rant too much about it, because maybe if I was in their shoes, I'd feel the same way. But obviously losing sucks. no one ever wants to lose. Everybody always wants to win, but unfortunately, when it comes to sports, you have one loser, you have one winner. And unfortunately for the Ravens, they were not the winners in this case. I will say, though, that, I mean, as long as you have Lamar on your team and Derrick Henry comes back in his beast mode 2.0 form, that the Ravens should definitely be competitive again next year. And I'll be the first to admit it. I think it's either going to be the Ravens or the Bengals that take the AFC North. I think the Steelers will take a step back next year. And as for the Browns, I don't know what their future is, what they plan on doing. But yeah, I don't think that the Browns or the Steelers will finish the top of the AFC North next year. But I could easily bite my tongue and they could prove me wrong. So a very tough loss for the Ravens. And like again, the one question for them is going to be: can they get over that hump? Can they get back into a Super Bowl? Or I think Jim Harbaugh is the coach, if I'm not mistaken, or John Harbaugh, I should say. Only made one Super Bowl appearance, and that was back in the 2012-13 season, which was essentially Ray Lewis's swan song, and he won the Super Bowl. And that was the last time that they made the Super Bowl. So that was like 12 years ago now. So I'm sure he's more than eager to get his team back into the big dance. But unfortunately, there's a lot of good teams in the AFC. And I'd say his best formula to get there would be to finish with a number one overall record. But that really didn't matter last year because they hosted Kansas City and they still lost. So whether they're a visiting team or an away team, I don't think it makes much of a difference. But I still think they should be competitive, and maybe next year could be the year. Who knows? So don't hang your head too much. At the same time, you know how difficult it is to get this far into the postseason. So you definitely have to make the best of it when the time comes. Okay, so that's enough ranting about the Ravens. So as for the Bills, I couldn't be more thrilled. I know it's going to sound crazy because the Bills knocked my Broncos out of the playoffs just last week, but for a team that's had such high expectations over the last couple of years, and it seemed like once the Bills took over that AFC East, it was like this is their time. Like they are basically the new Patriots of their division, and every year they have a good season, and the closest they got to a Super Bowl, as I talked about just recently, was when they played the Chiefs in the COVID 2021 season. Ever since then, they've lost basically every divisional matchup since then. So the fact that they got this division win and they're getting back to the Final Four for the first time in like 4 or 5 years shows a lot about this team. And there's something different about this Buffalo Bills team. And I'll be the first to admit it, even though I picked against them in my predictions. And as a quick little side note, I ended up finishing 2-2, just in case I forget, which I obviously I have a habit of doing. But for the Bills, there's something different about this team. And I mean, Josh Allen has proven to be an elite quarterback, and I've said this so many times in a lot of my videos that he is no doubt, without a question in my mind, that he's the MVP of the league. I'd love anybody else to prove me wrong. I mean, the fact that he's a big guy, he can throw it, he can run it, and he like when you think of a mobile quarterback, you think of more of like a Lamar Jackson or a Patrick Mahomes. Like they got the legs, they can swerve and they can move. But Josh Allen's just built differently. He's just rugged, he's tough, he's tall, and you would think he would be more of a pocket passer, like a Jared Goff kind of a QB. But man, the guy, like, you never know what he's going to do. It could be a run pass option. It could be a handoff. He could just do whatever the hell he wants. Play action, you name it. So he's got a lot of tricks up his sleeves as to what he can do to help his team move forward or move the sticks. So again, I can't rave enough about how well this team is. And when you got James Cook in your back, and now you got a big wide receiver and Amari Cooper on your team, they're definitely going to be a threat. And I think that this Bills team, I know I shouldn't say this because I'll probably jinx them and jinx myself for saying this, but they could go into Kansas City because that's who their AFC Championship opponent is going to be. But they could go into KC and pull this one off. I mean, think about when Cincinnati won, I think it was 3 years ago when they went all the way to the Super Bowl. They had to go into Kansas City and beat them, and they did. So I wouldn't be surprised if Buffalo put up more of a fight, I should say, against the Chiefs than they did in their previous encounter. So I'm almost half an hour into this, so I think I should probably cut my ties short while I still can. So yeah, just a fantastic weekend of football, and now we got one more weekend of football, and then Pro Bowl, and then the Super Bowl. So we're down to the last 3 weeks, folks, and I can't believe that in less than a month, football will be officially over, at least for the season. And then obviously the off season with trades and draft picks and all the other stuff will occur in March, April, or something like that. So yeah, I figure I might as well stop the video now before I keep rambling on and saying the same thing over and over again. But as always, if you're new to this channel and you like this type of content, feel free to hit the sub button. I'd be very grateful and very appreciative. Until next time, and as always, take care.